businesses will be laying off a lot of workers to stay alive. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you examine the facts with objectivity, the savings rate is at its lowest point since 2007. It is now 2.3%. Americans are now essentially bankrupt after using up all of their stimulus money. Credit card debt is currently at an all-time record level. Americans so struggle to pay their bills and put food on the table. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, please subscribe it and press the bell icon. They are therefore taking our greater credit card debt. When you look at the state of wages, you will see that they are really decreasing. And I believe that we are understating inflation, which is masking the true drop. The government will not acknowledge the true inflation rate, which is approximately twice as high. Thus, the real decrease in wages must be significantly bigger, which explains why so many individuals now work several jobs. Americans are working 2 or 3 jobs at once in record numbers. In reality, more Americans than ever are employed full-time in 2 jobs. Most people do not desire to hold several jobs. They would rather be able to support their family and themselves through one work. Unfortunately, that is not feasible in the Biden economy, and all of these new jobs that are being produced will be located there. People who don't want more jobs but are compelled to accept them because it's the only way they can keep up with the rising expense of living will receive them. The implication is that the 260,000 persons who are unemployed and without a job now have jobs. That wasn't what took place. All of those positions were filled by persons who already had jobs. These are contract positions. That is what is taking place. Additionally, it's not a wonderful economy when those with jobs must take on a second job. They would choose to be free. They would prefer to have more time to spend with their families. Sadly, they are unable to afford that. They must go and look for another work, and from there, these occupations are emerging. Let's imagine someone was retired and is now coming out of it. They are 70 years old. They were eager to simply play golf, visit the beach, and spend time with their grandchildren. The only way to pay for the grocery bill, though, is for them to go to work at Target. Do you want to take pride in building an economy that forces unemployed people back into the workforce? The fact that so many unemployed persons are not counted in the unemployment total is the main reason why the unemployment rate is so low. The labor force and the job market no longer include more than 100 million working-age Americans. The true unemployment rate, however, is in the double digits if you measured it objectively and took into account all the unemployed people who are not currently employed, but would be if they believed they could find employment or would have chosen a part-time position when they would have preferred a full-time position. Once more, the savings rate is 2.3%. That is the most recent figure that the administration made public last week. Savings hasn't been so low since 2005, but one of the reasons Americans weren't saving back then was due to the high level of house ownership. They were merely becoming wealthy through real estate. The real estate bubble peaked at that time. However, Americans are currently losing their home equity. Prices for real estate are now declining. But what's more troubling is that actual wages are declining as a result of rising living expenses and skyrocketing credit card debt. Thus, credit card debt wouldn't be increasing so rapidly if Americans really possessed all those funds. People's lack of saving is the main cause of the rise in credit card debts. They are unable to purchase items. They are required to borrow the cash. However, a greater portion of the money they borrow is going towards purchasing food. Electricity is being purchased with it, on gas. Take a look at the large shops who claim that because food is so costly, their customers are spending more on food and less on everything else. Currently, you're looking at credit card rates of around 20%, and the interest due is a significant sum. And because many of these buy now pay later businesses have popped up in recent years, I believe that many people now have much more consumer debt than just their credit card debt. People are therefore using those businesses to make cashless purchases. But as these purchases are not made using credit cards, they are still considered to be debt that must be repaid by the customer. And I don't think they'll be able to accomplish it. The recession will only become worse. That said, the Fed should still raise interest rates. They ought to have raised them far more than they have by this point. The issue was that they shouldn't have ever been cut. The error wasn't that. Rates were being lowered. Really, raising them back up is merely an admission of that error. But when the Fed raises rates, all of the issues that it brought about when it lowered rates come to light, because when it lowered interest rates to zero, it inflated a bubble economy and then filled it with air. Inflation was caused by quantitative easing. It's merely a different term for inflation. Just when inflation has a negative connotation, many individuals are unaware that it is occurring. Thus, the effects of quantitative easing don't seem as harsh. The people would have replied, "Wait a minute, I don't want inflation," if the Fed had stated that our policy is to produce inflation. Therefore, if they claim that quantitative easing is their policy, fewer people will criticize it. But those effects are now being felt by us. Prices are still growing, inflation is high, and there's still more to be done. And for that reason, among others, the recession will worsen significantly as more consumer income is directed toward essentials like food, energy, rent, insurance, and similar expenses. Additionally, interest rates will need to keep increasing. And because people have to pay off their debt, that will also drain a lot of the economy's purchasing power. Additionally, paying interest on money borrowed in the past to purchase items reduces the amount of money available for purchases in the present and the future. and it is what contributes to a recession that is more severe. Sadly, the majority of stockholders own the most expensive securities. For instance, big tech firms rose the most as a result of the zero interest rate environment and the widespread belief that inflation would remain low indefinitely. Well, those stock valuations are declining, but they still have a long way to go since interest rates are no longer at zero and inflation is there and rising worse. Therefore, the majority of investors will experience financial loss. Even though bond yields are higher right now, they're still far from being high enough to counteract inflation. Therefore, they will do even worse in the bond market. Therefore, bonds will cause a lot of people's losses. They must therefore begin to think creatively and consider unconventional forms of investing. You can still make stock investments, but not in the indexes that are so heavily weighted in pricey tech businesses. You must, exercise greater care when selecting the equities you purchase. Instead of just purchasing these indices, you must choose the stocks based on value and dividend yield and create your own portfolio. The best values, in my opinion, may be found abroad. Outside of the US, dividend yields are the greatest. Additionally, you gain the advantage of a hedge against what I anticipate to be a very weak US dollar. The dollar is up for a year, but those gains are disappearing quickly. There will be a run on the dollar and assets denominated in US dollars over the next few years, as markets come to terms with the fact that inflation is not only going to increase, but also that it is here to stay and is not going to drop to 2%. This will be especially true when the Federal Reserve is forced to resume quantitative easing, which is fueling more inflation as the economy deteriorates to the point where it actually turns into a recession. And right now, there is a lot of pressure on the Fed to attempt to stimulate the economy. However, the only way to do that is to increase inflation more. Right, just a brief mention of the positions that are being lost first. These are full-time, well-paying positions that also come with benefits. The jobs we are creating are part-time, low-paying, and benefit-free. When you consider the jobs we are losing and the jobs that are being created to replace those lost employments, it becomes clear that I cannot even make a trade-off. But I believe that the layoffs are still relatively new. There will be a significant number of layoffs, and in some cases, businesses that are going bankrupt will be forced to lay off their whole workforce. But in order for businesses to stay in business and avoid going out of business, they will have to start cutting costs. What costs can they cut? Is work. Thus, in order to reduce labor costs, employees must be fired. And the root of this is that businesses' actual sales are declining as a result of their consumers' financial difficulties. As a result, they are unable to purchase as many goods. As a result, the businesses selling such goods or services don't require as many employees to assist in providing those goods or services. Additionally, if an employer borrows money, which many firms have done to purchase capital equipment they may need, they should expect to pay higher interest rates. They may have to pay more rent for their office space, and the price of the other raw materials may also be going up. They must therefore figure out how to survive, because businesses must turn a profit because that is how their owners profit from their operations. They must figure out how to make a profit if they don't already have one, or else they risk going out of business. So one approach would be to shrink back the size of the company, which entails cutting down on staff. And that will continue across the entire economy. Of course, there are several businesses that were only established as a result of monetary policy and should have never existed in the first place. The low interest rates set by the Fed have created a casino-like atmosphere on the stock market. Numerous companies have a large number of employees despite never having made a profit. How did they manage to pay these employees if they had no cash on hand? In actuality, they were using the money received from the sale of their stock to investors to pay their staff. However, many of these businesses will be able to survive if there is no longer a market for shares in businesses that are losing money, and if they are able to significantly scale back their operations and begin making a profit, that will be the only way they can continue operating. They will likely have to lay off the majority of their personnel as a result. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you like this video, please hit the like button.